Well, hello everyone. This is Brian M. Truskowski with Illuminate. Famous person over here, Steve McLean. You've seen him before in my videos. We have a new series that we're going to be doing with you, and this is sort of guided by Steve. So I'm going to hand it over to him in a minute. But in short, he does some amazing healing work, and he's wanting to share that with you. And so we're going to be experiencing live right now a healing session. And so I'll let Steve take it away from here. So go ahead, Steve, explain to the world what it is we're about to go into and what the impact is going to be.
Okay. So the work we're going to be doing is called observational healing. So the idea of observational healing is we set up a field, there's a bunch of beings that are holding a space for change. And then our job is, when we listen to the words, we connect with those various beings, the field is set up. So we're going to be doing this recording, which is going to be recording setting up a field and then working with the field. So when a person watches this, it may not be the same field that we're setting up today. It'll be the field that's set up for the person watching it. That's kind of how these things work on these other levels. So I'll go through, and if a person's watching this later, hopefully at least one person will watch this later, but if not, then we'll have our experience. And when a person watches it later, what they're going to want to do is listen to the names of the beings that are called in and see if they can connect with them. And then at a certain point, when the field is set up, then we're going to ask the higher self to take us through the portal of time to an event that would be the highest good to release and integrate at this time. So if a person is listening to this later, then that may be the event that they're taken back to. It may be a different event than the one we're going back to right now. And then when we go back to this event, we also invite all souls affected by the event to return to the event and release and integrate the energy of the event for themselves. So that my thought on this was that if we do this healing field, if you and I participate in this healing field, it'll affect us by going through the process. And then it'll also affect others later when they go through the process. And if they like the experience, if they have a good experience and they feel things change, then they can connect to the world healing field, the world observational healing field, anytime they want by stating out loud, I connect to the world observational healing field. And then they can work with those energies on a worldwide level. So that field was set up in the end of January of 2020. And so it's been running a little over 3 years. And it's on the world healing field. It goes on 24 hours a day. And so anytime that you might want to connect to it. So if you are having a particular feeling like you're working with a lot of intense energies or something, you can just say, I choose to connect with the world healing field. And then you will be in that field while you're working with the energetics that you find yourself working with. And you can also listen to this video anytime you want, and a healing field will be set up for you through what we're going to do today. So that's probably enough information.
Yeah, or optionally, I'll even plug you and say, if we can maybe put your email address in the video, and if people want to have a private video or private call, no?
No,
Okay.
we're not going
to. I'm just wanting to add that, but okay.
Right. Yeah, and that's fine. But I don't really want to tap into the world of the internet. So I do work with clients, but they're all referrals. So if somebody, contacts me, they've had a friend who's had some amazing experience who told them about it, and they want to have that, and that's all fine. But I don't want to really open I want to open this up to the world so the world can have this experience on their own, not with me.
I love it. Great.
I just got my record player working, and so I'm kind of busy now with going through and listening to all those records from the 60s and 70s.
Nice.
Not really, but yeah. So
Great. Beautiful.
so we'll go ahead and let it roll. So today I'm going to say I'm going to use you as the person we're setting up the healing field for. So we'll be going back and clearing some event. We don't need to know what the event is. If you see some things or feel some things, you may get some understanding of what the event was. But it doesn't really matter what the event was. It's the intention of going back to the event and releasing the energy of the event that changes everything. And also to have the support of these beings. So I choose to set up a healing field for Brian. And if someone's listening to this, I can say I choose to set up a healing field for, and then the person can just state their name. And then all of a sudden the healing field is being set up for them. And then I ask that the Brotherhood of Light please be present. And the Deva of Healing please be present. Pan of Nature please be present. The Sisterhood of Light please be present. All of Brian's helpers and guides please be present. My helpers and guides please be present. Saint Germain please be present. Metatron please be present. Kuan Yin please be present. Master Mo please be present. Master Kun Li please be present. The Christ consciousness please be present. The holders of space please be present. Sanat Kumara please be present. And Abrahamanad please be present. Alcazar please be present. The interdimensional being please be present. Thoth please be present. Ra please be present. Higher self please be present. And our soul ray group please be present. And I ask that we be placed in a field of protection while we do this work. I ask the higher self to take us through the portal of time, through the event that would be of the highest good to release and integrate at this time. And I invite all souls to return to the event, to release and integrate the energy of the event for themselves. Upon our arrival at the event, I ask the higher self to assist us to release and integrate all energies of the event gently and easily, fully and completely, on all levels and through all space and time. So the field is set up. We've returned to the event. Some people who have, maybe some strong psychic abilities may see things taking place, or even mild psychic abilities, just or a good imagination. They may see some event. My suggestion is that even if you do see the event, that you make sure you stay a good distance away from it, because It's called observational healing because it's useful to be in more of an observer mode while it's going on than be in oneself that may have had a traumatic experience in another lifetime. So we don't need to go back through that trauma experience. We can just go back to the experience in a field of protection on a soul level and release the energy for us on a soul level that was not released at the time the event took place. So there's also a part of our soul that is back at the event who has already released the energy of the event for themselves. So that part of our soul, the part of us that went back, are the part of us that still held the energy of the trauma of the event. The part of us that is at the event is the part we're going to get back, but that's not a traumatized part. And we will no longer hold the energy of that trauma when we return from the event. So normally, I would say the majority of the time, going back and clearing the event and reconnecting with that part of our soul that had remained at the event, and doing that process normally takes between an hour to an hour and a half. Now, in this case, it may occur faster. It doesn't really matter how long it takes. It just matters how thoroughly we release the energetics. So you and I can talk about, things we're noticing. Like for me, I'm noticing my feet are getting really buzzy. And that's fairly usual because we carry the energetics of the event in our body field. So it affects us for lifetimes until we go back and resolve it. So now we're back resolving it. And one of the first things that happens is energy starts to move. So we may all of a sudden be aware of different places in our body. So if I'm in a session, I'm in a session right now with you, I may describe things that I'm noticing from the energetics that we're releasing. So I would say, the thing that I'm noticing the most is the area of the kidneys. And so I'll talk a little bit about the various areas of the body and what they're typically related to as we clear this, because we don't need to concentrate. We're grounding this energy. That's all we need to do is just go back to the event and ground the energy of the event. So we don't need to keep it sounding spiritual or anything. We're just back in an event grounding energy. But I will talk about typically every event I've gone back to. So I've been going back to these events in this way since 2013. So I started going back to events with people in about 1981 or 82. So that's when I first started going back to events with people and to release and integrate the energy of the event with them. And then in 2013, I came upon this process, and then all sorts of beings began showing up and asking me if I would like their help. And so, of course, I said yes. And so more and more beings were added. There were just a certain number of beings in the beginning, but then Saint Germain showed up, and then Metatron showed up, and Kuan Yin showed up, and this being Master Mo and this being Master Kun Li. And I think I was working with the Christ consciousness in the earlier work that I was doing. And then the holders of space are also known as the Ascended Masters. So they're a large group of beings. And there's books about the, masters of the Far East or something, but the Ascended Masters, there's a lot of them. And so they hold the space for what we're doing. And then Sanat Kumara is a kind of an overseer of this earth realm and kind of works on the higher realms for the energetics that are worked with and who comes here and what's happening here. And then Abrahamanad is the soul of the earth that came in 1997. So Abrahamanad is the soul of the earth. So that being is when we're grounding energy into the earth. And as Abrahamanad said, there's no bad energy. There's just, maybe perceived misuse of energy. But energy in itself isn't good or bad. Energy is just energy. It's uncomfortable when it's stuck, and it gets much more comfortable when it flows. So energy wants to move. So like right now, we're letting energy move. So the first thing I noticed was the kidneys. All of a sudden, I became aware of the kidney area. And the kidneys, the small intestine, and the adrenal glands are all related to fight or flight. So the three things that typically come up in a session are fight or flight, grief and loss, anger. So those are the big three. We can have all sorts of feelings and all sorts of emotions that move, might feel resentment, but they all kind of fit into that package of the fight or flight, the grief, loss, and the anger. And so the fight or flight typically affects the femur heads, the leg bones where they attach to the hip bones, the lower part of the ribs, the upper part of the ribs and the shoulders, the atlas vertebra and the base of the skull, the occiput, and then the jaw in the front. Those are all fight or flight areas. The grief and loss affects the knees and the elbows. It affects the fourth sacral segment, so our kind of our root energies. It's in the fourth sacral segment. The third lumbar, which affects the ovaries and the testes, and the lungs, and the thyroid, and the parietal bones on the side of the head, and the eyes and the ears. Those are all grief areas. So knees, elbows, third lumbar, third and fourth thoracics, the center part of the neck, third and fourth cervical vertebra, and the sides of the head, the parietal bones. So when we're releasing grief and loss, we might feel the energy coming out of our ears, or we might find it coming out of our eyes or out of the sides of our head. Or if we're really moving some grief, we might feel it in our chest. And then the other one is related to anger. And so that one, and it can be resentment and it can be irritation, but it really relates to a rise in our power, because on this planet, the way we're taught to hold our power in is we're abused. So we're verbally abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, whatever. That gets us to hold our power in. And it's held in as anger. So when the anger starts to come out, that means we're just releasing that energy that was used to trap our power. So what I say when somebody starts, appearing really irritated or angry or something, I say, oh, your power is rising. And I don't say that just as a glib comment. I say that because that's actually what's happening. So when we find ourselves angry or enraged or irritated, it means that we're releasing that energy of maybe the trauma of this lifetime, maybe happened really early. in this lifetime. Could have been our birth process, where they didn't let the umbilical cord quit pulsing before they cut it, which forces the body into shock, because nature has a way where when the body comes out of the womb and the skin hits the air, it sets things in motion. So there's valves in the heart that close. The body begins disconnecting from the umbilical, from the mother's blood, and begins pumping the blood inside itself. And that process takes about 5 minutes. So if you're born in a hospital and you come out, they go clamp, clamp, cut. That's it. And you're disconnected from the mother. And you don't have that 5 minutes. So some people may be feeling like some umbilical area healing going on, just my talking about it, because this was the way it was done. You'd come out in a hospital, a clamp would be put on one side, a clamp would be put on the other side, and it would be cut, and then they'd tie a knot, and that made your belly button. Whereas in nature, that blood keeps pumping until the newborn system kicks in and starts breathing their own oxygen and pumping their own blood, and then they disconnect from the umbilical cord. And then at which point, in nature, the goat will lean over and just bite it and chew it off. That's it. That's how nature does it. They're not worried about viruses or, is the little goat going to get some sort of umbilical infection because the mother's, using her teeth to bite the umbilical cord. But we do it differently because have tended in the past to be very paranoid people about health. I mean, so paranoid that very few people are healthy, because one of the things that really can alter our immune function is the adrenal glands being worn out, being stressed out, lowers our immune function. So if you really stress people out and use certain words that get people really stressed out, and you keep them stressed out, it lowers their immune function. So they have to find ways to actually stimulate their immune function, like take adrenal supports, because the adrenal glands are very involved in immune function. So if your adrenal glands are constantly stressed out because you live in a stressful world, then you need to maybe support that, or just let go of those energies, or just quit listening, turn off the televised programming, whatever it is that you need to do to break that cycle of that external traumatization of you as a spiritual being. So we've got fear, fight or flight, grief and loss, and anger. So those are the big three, and they affect different parts. And so anger affects the ankles and the feet. And that's when that trauma that's held as anger locks up our ankles and our feet. It keeps us from being as grounded. So that's why when we open up a healing session, oftentimes the first thing you'll feel is that buzzing in the feet. And that's your energy moving. And it may not be, it may not be that anger is the first thing that comes out for you, but it could be. But like in our instance, in this particular session, it was the kidneys. So it was fight or flight began to release. And then, my body starts to move. So, when I do a session with someone, it's over the phone and it's not video. So they're not watching me moving all over, releasing all these things in the shoulder or whatever, that I'll be doing today. Somewhat on the video, I'll try to be a little bit cautious of not doing too much, but there will just be things like right now, the center part of the neck. And I talked about that center part of the neck being related to grief and loss. And just before that, I was noticing the elbows were beginning to release some energy. So there's the grief and loss portion of this event we're back at is coming out. And so, the knees will show up in it. When the diaphragm, which allows us to breathe, is very affected by fight or flight. So if we're in a frozen state of fight or flight, our diaphragm tends to be tighter. We can't breathe as well. People talk about that they have asthma, but basically they have frozen fight or flight, And so if they, take an inhaler or take something to negate the effects, then they're not actually releasing that fight or flight. They're just chemically altering it. And then people get so used to thinking that they need to chemically alter everything that they don't think that they're actually responsible for their bodies and they can actually do healing work on themselves. So that's kind of the idea of this video, is for people to have an experience of healing themselves. So people say to me, "Oh, you're such an amazing healer." And I'll go, "Well, it's nice of you to say." But really, all the healing that takes place in a session is by the individual who's experiencing the session. So if the person just locks up and goes, "I'm not changing," well, then they're not going to be saying like, "You're such an amazing healer" afterwards, because they say, "Nothing happened." I go, "Okay." Like, yeah. And so that's great. Things are happening with you. Things are moving. And so you can feel those energies moving. So you're moving with them. Then you might afterwards go, "Oh, Steve, he's this amazing healer." No, you take responsibility for it. You'll have to say, "I'm Brian. I'm an amazing healer. I just did some amazing healing work." And if your most amazing healing work is with yourself,
Ooh.
yeah, it's spinning now. And this is what happens to me when I'm with a client, is like my legs will start trembling, my body will start releasing energies in certain places, and my head will be moving around and stuff, because I am helping the person. So this is where I help the person ground the disturbed energies so they get grounded quicker. Because when we're working with disturbed energies, you just don't want to sit in them for all that long. You want the energy to move as quickly as it can. And so earlier when I was setting up the field, I asked the higher self to assist us to release and integrate all the energies of the event gently and easily. That's the first words I say: gently and easily, fully and completely, on all levels and through all space and time. I mean, that pretty much covers it. So we want to clear this thing completely. And I was thinking that, well, when we were doing this, that we might not necessarily be having all this stuff going on, but of course we are, because this is what goes on in a healing session. So right now, this area between the second and the third cervicals. So I practiced as a chiropractor for 40 years, approximately. I guess I still do. So 43 years. But this area between the second and the third cervicals, this area is related to a lot of emotions. And this is an area that we lock up when we're uncomfortable with emotions. So it's not surprising that even though you and I have done a lot of emotional work, by ourselves and together, we may be experiencing more. We invited every soul that was affected by this event to return to the event, to release and integrate the energy for themselves. So because we have some skills of grounding, so I may be doing some grounding, helping you with some grounding, or you may be helping me with some grounding, and we both may be helping all these souls that return to this event with some grounding. Because this feels to me like a rather large event we've gone back to. And it's not surprising to me that you texted me a while longer and said, "I have some time. Would this seem like a good time to do this?" And I'm like, it does seem like a good time to do this. How great is that? That the time is right. And now is the only time that's ever right, to do something.
Yeah, and all the yawning is definitely something moving through and releasing. And I don't have to, I mean, I have
Yeah.
some vague image of what it is, but it doesn't matter, is kind of
Yeah.
getting sense
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. And if you feel like, having, talking about it, feel free to, because that may help somebody who's watching it go, oh, but the whole thing with yawning is the jaw, the upper and the lower part of the jaw, and the occiput and the atlas are all related to fight or flight, as is the shoulders. So when we're beginning to release this energy of fight or flight, then we may find ourselves yawning. And if we can continue to yawn, yawning is the fastest way to release stress that I know of. It beats meditation, it beats everything. If you allow yourself and are able to yawn for 20 minutes, you'll feel like you had a 2-week vacation. Literally, if you yawn for 20 minutes, we used to do it as part of a class that I taught in the 80s. It was like I moved in the house. I was there from 84 to 88. So I was doing these classes with this friend of mine on energetic healing. So it was between 84, probably about 86, 87. But part of the exercise, we'd just have people, one person hold the space and the other person yawn and continue to yawn for 20 minutes, and then they'd switch. But they'd be in that whole fear release, energy release. And I feel my shoulders kind of coming forward. And so I feel my throat tightening up as well. So the throat has to do with grief and loss. So it's not like these things come out one at a time. They're all interconnected. So the grief can be coming out, the anger can be coming out, the fight or flight can be coming out. They can all come out. They can come out separately or all at once. And like in this case, we're just giving people a good example of how this thing works. Like I'm sitting here moving my shoulders and I'm feeling all this tingling going down my arms, and I'm feeling all this tension releasing in my throat. And if you listen, you'll actually hear the person's voice change as they release all this tension they are holding in their throat. Their voice will change, and as their diaphragm releases, they'll tend to speak from deeper in their body, speak more from their belly rather than speak from their throat, or speak from their head, because we can speak from our head, or we can speak from our throat, or we can speak from our chest, or we can speak from our gut, or we can speak from our pelvis. Our sound, depending on where we let our consciousness be, what parts of the body we're comfortable being in, can actually change the sound of our voice based on where we happen to be situated within our body. Because we think, well, I'm in my body, but are you in your head? Are you in your heart? Are you in your gut? Are you in your legs? Are you grounding yourself to the healing center of the earth? Is energy moving through your legs? Do you feel that energy moving through your legs? Are you more aware of your knees? And now, so this is typically, the throat is typically grief. And then now I start feeling it come out the ears. So you can just keep going, and I'm going to pause for a moment and I'll be right back.
And I'll just speak while he is taking a break, that I have worked with Steve for off and on for many years, and this is my first experience. And so you may see me wiggling or yawning, and I'm feeling the energy moving through my body. And so I'm not just being impatient or whatever, and I'm not bored. A lot of times people associate yawning with boredom, and that's not true. In this case, yawning is me releasing energy. Laughing, crying, shaking, yawning, I say burping, farting, sneezing are all forms of release. And so, as Steve mentioned, yawning is moving this energy. So as you see me yawning, it's moving different layers of that. And I've noticed that there's different intensities of yawning. Sometimes the yawning is just a little yawn, and sometimes you see me like going a full body yawn, and so it's just different layers being released, different depths of it. And as I mentioned, I'm not trying to find the story in this. It's like, oh, these things are moving, and how it isn't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And right now, things are just moving. So I invite you to just, if you're on this journey, just take a few moments and just really tune into what's going on and feel it and allow yourself to get into it and allow your body to do what it wants to do. Give it permission. I'm giving you permission to let your body move the way it needs to move.
Now, one thing that may happen is when energies begin to move, all of a sudden you need to go pee or something. And so just hit pause if you want to. It won't stop the healing process. Go pee, come back. And you don't even need to watch this on a visual level, although there may be some things that are useful for you to see, like, oh, this person's releasing this energy in their neck. And I kind of feel like my body wants to release that energy in my neck. And right now, I did that chiropractic thing for over 40 years. So I relate to the areas like, oh, this is in my lower neck. This is around C6, C7, the lower cervical vertebra. Those are related to the ankles and the feet and anger and the coccyx and the pubic bone and the umbilicus and the fifth lumbar and the bottom to the top of the sternum.
Woo! There it comes.
Yeah. Yeah, things are moving. And this is great. This is basically, a person doesn't have to be, demonstrable. They don't have to be doing all this movement. And also, if they find their bodies wanting to move and they let their bodies move. So if they're doing this process, sitting in a chair or lying on their bed, and they can be watching it if they want, or they could just be listening to it. But they're more than likely, you who's listening to this is more than likely going to be feeling these energies move, because we've set up a healing field and we've set up an intention for healing. And we've gone back to an event that it is useful to release the energy of the event. And I always ask the higher self to take us to the event that would be of the highest good, to release and integrate at this time. So the event that Brian and I have gone back to, and all the other souls that went back to the event with us, is having this particular effect on us. But when you watch this video, it may not be that when we say and take us to the event that you go to the same event. You may have the higher self, may take you to a completely different event, but the field will be set up. So you'll be fully supported. And on some level, all know what's going on. And that's why I don't really want necessarily feedback from people to have like an email address or something and be sending me, stories about their healing. It's like, I'm glad. If this works for you, I'm really glad. And if you feel like this was a monumental change for you, I'm sure Brian has some like and subscribe and donate button. If he doesn't have a donate button, maybe he will. You can send Brian some donation of any amount if you feel like it. But I don't need anything coming back to me. I don't need any information. I'm just putting this out. But I will be aware of when people tune into this, because they're tuning into a healing field that I'm setting up with these beings. So I'm responsible for grounding the energy of that field. So that's enough for me. So if you end up doing a healing session online, you are doing a healing session with me. And if you want to send some money, send it to Brian because
Or
he's
you,
younger.
or
He
you
could
can
use it.
share the video as well.
And you can share the video, like and subscribe, share the video, heal all your friends. You know, you could do this as a mass gathering. You have a whole bunch of people get together, and you're probably all part of the soul group that had the same trauma that all need to go back to it at once. So it can work out really well. And, it's fine with me if this just goes out into the world. I'm just not so interested in it coming back to me, you know? Um, I I've been working with the world healing field for over 3 years now. And at first it was really difficult. And I'd say for the first year or two, it felt like more than I could handle. But then it got to the point where I was used to it. And so now it doesn't feel like it's more than I can handle. It feels like exactly what I can handle. And obviously, all along, it was exactly what I could handle because I handled it. It just seemed like too much. I would even tell, I have voices in my head and I would talk to these guides and I'd say, this is too much. I can't do this. And they go, well, we're not going to give you anything you can't do. So you can know, even though you might be however long we've been talking, half hour or so, you know that you can handle at least a half hour of a healing session. More than likely, if it goes for an hour, you can handle an hour-long healing session. And also, every time you would listen to this, more than likely, you're going to go back to a different event. You're not going to, because every time you go back to an event, you finish it. So if you listen to it again, you're not going to go back to the event. You're going to go back to the event that would be of the highest good to release and integrate at this time. So if you watch it and a week later you watch it, more than likely a week later, you're going to be at a different event with different souls that are processing this event. And there's been lots of events. There's been plenty of wars. There's been plenty groups attacking other groups. And yeah, this is kind of a free will plane and not necessarily a place for the weak of heart. If you come to this place, more than likely you've come to do some work. And it may be in that lifetime that you came into that your work was to exit as a warrior, or exit during some major cataclysmic event. A lot of people have found themselves going back to Atlantis or to Lemuria or to, Mount Vesuvius, where I think they discovered this whole town under Mount Vesuvius that just was covered with lava. And the heat was so intense that there were actually people standing with like a loaf of bread and they just turned to stone because the heat just cooked. And so there's been all sorts of these events that have gone on and on and on and on and on. And like some of them weren't recorded because the people that experienced the event weren't around to record it afterwards. But then they discover like, oh, I think I'd gone back to Mount Vesuvius with a number of clients, and how we knew it was Mount Vesuvius, I don't know. But in one of the clients I went back with, the person goes, Mount Vesuvius. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm getting to, Mount Vesuvius. And I didn't know. So we both looked up Mount Vesuvius later, and there were all sorts of interesting pictures that showed up with the people that I guess the lava just flowed over them or whatever it was that happened. I can't remember exactly. So, but anyway, there's all sorts of interesting events that you might find yourself going back to while listening to this video or some other person's video, who does that, a similar type of thing. So now that area between the shoulder blades is releasing. And, I'm just saying that because that's what's happening right now for me here in this experience, is I'm just feeling that area between the shoulder blades releasing. That area is, related to the lungs. It's related to grief and loss. It can be related to grief over loss or anger over loss, because the gallbladder is more anger about the loss, and then there's the grief about the loss, but it could be either. But anyway, that's where it's located, middle of the scapulas, and that's areas releasing right now. And remember earlier, the throat released, and the ears are still releasing, and we may even feel like the eyes just release some energy. And I'm saying that because if it's releasing there between the scapulas, more than likely it's going to come out the eyes too, and the sides of the head. So if all of a sudden you're like, what's going on with my head? And I ask that myself that a lot. What's going on with my head? But the head, is an area that holds energy. Every part of the body can hold energy, but the head has a tendency to hold a lot of kind of memory energy. And the front of the head, that part of the brain has to do with emotions. So oftentimes you'll see people doing this, and they're balancing their emotions. They're balancing the energetics of the event. So if you find yourself, putting your hand over your head, like, you're doing something. This is actually, was studied and found out it's a process of brain balancing. You're just putting your hand over your head like this, and you might not be thinking, you might be feeling. Might not be the thinker, might be the feeler. And then something seems to release, and we just allow ourselves to have an experience. So right now, just a lot of tension coming out behind the jawbone, in front of the mastoid. Brian may be feeling that, or Brian may be feeling some other part of the body, because he and I are both releasing the energy of this event that we've gone back to. And we're supporting, all the souls that have gone back to this event to release the energy of the event for themselves. So we're supporting them to do that as well. But there's this whole thing taking place, releasing in the temporal bone. And so that temporal bone is unlocking, and that temporal bone is related to the pelvis. So the pelvis is probably unlocking. And it was interesting because just before I came down from the woods, from the cabin in the woods into the house to get on the computer and do this, all of a sudden I was having allergies. And, I did a lot of work to eliminate allergies. So I don't really have much in the way of allergies. But all of a sudden I was like, all these feeling of allergies. And I said, oh, this might be related to what Brian and I are going to do. Or maybe Brian's feeling allergies. Who cares? And then within, a few minutes, they were just gone. And sometimes, people have allergies for weeks. And I'd rather, if I have some sort of allergic symptom, that I have it for a matter of a minute or two and have it go away. Because who wants to feel like you've got? And there's probably a lot of pollen out there right now, and people who are sensitive to pollen, they might be noticing it. And now this is occiput releasing. And oftentimes, like right there, the whole foramen magnum, which I think means big hole in your head, but it's where your brain connects with your brainstem, which connects with your spinal cord, and it goes right through that area, your atlas vertebra and your foramen magnum, your big hole. And that's where your brainstem is. And oftentimes, when a trauma is getting really to a point where it's releasing at a core level, it'll release in the brainstem, which it's doing right now. So this doesn't have to be happening right then for you, although who's to say it's not going to happen right then for you when you watch this. But then that tension comes out. I feel the tension coming out of the cerebellum, and that's another spot. So the brainstem is a spot. The cerebellum, which is the posterior part of the brain, kind of stores ancestral memory, can store lifetimes where we learned something, to be afraid of something, and so we have those fear responses in that part of the brain. So sometimes those fear responses just come out of that part of the brain like that. And then you might find yourself yawning because that's the way the body releases fight or flight, releases it from the jaw like that. This is just happening in this session, but it might be happening for you when you're doing this a session, watching this video. But now the area of the heart is releasing. So the heart's a place where a lot of emotions are stored. And so it's another, so the core areas are the brainstem, the cerebellum, the heart, and the solar plexus. So those are places where we have core holds of events. So the event we've gone back to, through the portal of time, back to the event, the way that that event is affecting me right now is I'm releasing all this core energy from my heart. And I've got my eyes closed, so I don't even know what Brian's doing now, but Brian might be doing something. And there goes that. So that's the heart release. And then, it doesn't always go this way, but oftentimes the heart releases and all of a sudden the solar plexus. And there's other places that you might feel released, but these are the kind of the 4 core spots. So it's pretty cool that we're getting to do all 4 of them in this particular session. And you just notice it. You just feel something's coming out. You feel it release and you let it go. And at any time during this process, if you feel like something's too much, this is too intense, just state out loud, I choose to let this go. And those are going to be some of the most magic words you ever speak out loud. I choose to let this go. Like if it's really uncomfortable, it's only really uncomfortable because you're not letting it go. So if you state out loud, I choose to let this go, you could become really comfortable really quickly. You don't have to suffer to heal. The suffering is optional. The healing just takes place as we release. And the less resistance we have to releasing the energy, the easier the energy releases. So if you want to, suffer through a healing experience, go ahead and suffer through it. But no, you don't have to. Now I can say that because I don't have to either. And I will also say that sometimes I'm fairly uncomfortable. Like, if I get in a healing session with someone who's in the middle of an intense migraine, I may experience that intense migraine where on my own, I've never had a migraine, but in a healing session, I've had lots of migraines, and I'm really glad I don't have them on any kind of regular basis. But there's something releasing in the brain right now that I would call a headache, And, the quicker you release that, the less suffering is optional, you resist the release of this energy, you might suffer. You can resist the energy and maybe you won't suffer. I mean, it's not that I want you to suffer and feel bad about not letting go of something. I do want to inform you that the faster you're willing to let this thing go, the less discomfort you tend to have. Okay. And then that was just more of that fight or flight energy, the atlas vertebra, the jaw, the occiput, that whole area, just more of that release, more of that movement and freedom between your second cervical and your third cervical. more of that grief can just come out, and you could be done with it as quickly as you want to be. Now, it's been my experience that when I work with clients over the phone, that the sessions generally last from an hour to an hour and a half. But a few weeks ago, I had a session with a client who I've worked with for quite a while, and the sessions last an hour to an hour and a half. And the person cleared everything in like a half hour. And it didn't seem like less in terms of the intensity of what we released. It seemed fast. And so it may be that that's the way things are moving, that you may find that you're just an incredible healer, that even though you've held on to this thing for lifetimes, you can let go of it in a very short period of time. Why would I suggest that? Why not suggest that? Well, that might be a hypnotic suggestion. So if I do make a hypnotic suggestion that you heal quicker if it's in your highest good, why would you want to do that? Like, you're suggesting things to me. I'm always suggesting things to you. And the main thing I'm suggesting to you is just let it go. Just let it go. Well, what if I need to learn something from it? Once you let it go, you will have learned something from it. You'll have learned that holding on to stuff can lead you to be really uncomfortable, and letting go of it can lead you to a whole nother world that you get to live in, that you might like a whole lot better. So why not try it? Okay, so there's this whole expansion thing going. I don't know what this whole thing is that's going on now, but there's this whole expansion thing of the occiput. The occiput feels like it's getting bigger. Seems like a whole bunch of lights coming into my head. And this stuff happens in sessions. I wasn't necessarily expecting it to happen, but why wouldn't I expect it to happen? It seems to happen in every session. And every time Brian and I do something together, there's some sort of transformation that takes place. So I may as well start expecting it. And I never mind it, when I'm transformed by a conversation with Brian. It's not like I complain about it afterwards. I'm like, oh, we just work with all this golden light, all this white light, all this pink light, all this green light, all this purple light. It's all light's good. Light's good. The lighter you get, the better you'll feel. Maybe not initially, but eventually, and maybe right away. You just don't know. Okay, that's clear. That's clear. The event's clear. So at the end of this, I say some words, and these are the words. So I ask the interdimensional being, Thoth, Ra, the higher self, our soul ray group, to assist all the souls that have returned to this event to combine with that part of their soul that had remained at the event, and bring that combined soul back into their body in present time with all of its wisdom, power, and clarity. I would ask all those souls to ground themselves into the healing center of the earth and open up the portal for the delivery of the new energies that we've agreed to bring into the earth at this time. And I ask that those new energies be brought in now. And I ask that they be activated. And I let the universe and beyond know that this has been done and that it's good. And that, my friends, is an observational healing session. And I'll open my eyes in a minute. And I hope that you have a very useful, perfect experience if you watch this and you choose to do this. And don't so much think about it as a visualization, although visualization can be really good, but think of it more as an energetic field that's being set up for your healing. Now, you heal, the world heals. So you do a healing session and you heal the world, that aspect of the world that is you. And it's your healing that's going to heal the world. That's why I began to get excited about the possibilities of doing this in this way. So there's no need to be exchange of funds and PayPal accounts and checks being written. And not that I mind any of those things, they're all fine. But how nice if Brian and I can just do this one or maybe multiple videos, because we might do other videos just talking about the world and how we perceive it, and how we perceive it affects the world that we perceive, and those kind of things. But anyway, this is an observational healing session. It's our gift to you, and we hope you enjoy it and derive fantastic benefits from it, and share it with anyone in the world that you feel might benefit from it. And then if you want to, like and subscribe so you can make a comment and tell Brian how wonderful he is. Not
That's
that he
not
needs to hear
necessary
that.
either.
Not necessary either, but if you want to make a comment, do it to Brian. And if he feels like I need to know about it, he'll let me know about it. Yeah, good job, people. It's been a pleasure working with you. And I'm going to open my eyes now if I can.
You don't have to. I'll just say while you're figuring that out that I'm glad you did the ending part, because I definitely feel way more in my body. I was feeling as my hands dissolve into the world, that's kind of how it felt, right?
Yeah,
So I'm definitely feeling a little bit more present,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
after all that.
And the purpose of the whole healing thing is for those energies to come in,
Yeah.
because we have to clear the event to bring the energies in clear. So every healing session involves bringing these new higher vibrational lights and energies into the world following the session. So that happens every time.
Yeah, and I'm losing light over here as I'm getting darker and darker, but I will say that through a period of it, I definitely, in addition to like the yawning and the burping and the moving, I definitely felt nausea,
Yeah,
through a bit of it. And again, I just observed it. I'm like, oh, okay, and just
yeah,
through, and then okay, that's something else now. So okay.
yeah. And there's some really fun things that are happening on your video screen. Like when you move your hands,
Yeah,
there's
there's
like,
this moon. I have a moon.
well, and things, yeah, and things
This is
show up.
this is obviously a digital screen, so I have things behind me that are popping up. And I can't get it to pop up now, but I have like a moon, so people may have seen that a
Oh
few
yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah. So that's what it was. That's really fun. And then it looked like there's a road behind you, you know. Anyway, it's very cool. I'm gonna have to get a digital screen. I'm
I'll
gonna
teach
have to talk to my IT person about it.
I'll teach you how to do it, or someone will. Anyway,
Oh, well, then he can be my IT person.
woo! Oh, there's the moon. Hang on, you can kind of see the moon
Oh
now, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so cool. It's almost like you got this magic act. I can't do that here, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's the moon.
Oh
It's
yeah.
there
Super cool.
it is.
Super cool.
All right. Well,
All right.
thank you
Well,
all. And this is we're complete, right, Steve?
yeah, we're complete.
Well, thank you all. This has been wonderful, and yeah, if you feel inclined, leave a comment, leave a message, or if anything, just share this video with other people that you think may be desiring to have this experience. So
Like and subscribe.
there he goes. Like you said, like and subscribe.
Like
All right,
and subscribe.
and share. All right,
And
everyone.
share.
Thank you all. This has been a beautiful time. Thank you, Steve, for sharing your wisdom with
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
until next time,
Pleasure.
whatever that means, we'll see you. We'll see you then.
Yeah, we'll see you when the moon shows up.
And the moon shows up. Whoa. Like, I don't know.